the number 8 is going to be her lucky number. Now, quite quickly we discover that she's also fighting to keep her independence. She's in her 80s. She's trying to hold on to her apartment that she wants to live in, but her younger children are trying to get them to come and live with them in their really big, very American homes. And that was an interesting contrast to go from her apartment, which is a very Chinese setup, very familiar to those of us who've been in those environments, going to a very American setup where her children are. She doesn't want to go. So she needs money to be able to pay for it. So the luck becomes important. And she goes to a casino in order to exploit that luck, and leads to one of the most fun sequences I've seen for a long time, which is her just winning, and winning. And she's hilariously grumpy. She chain smokes through the entire film, much to all of the other characters' complete chagrin. Absolutely unapologetic for who she is, to the point of obnoxiousness. It just played so beautifully by Saixin, who is a Chinese-born actor but has worked right across the world for the last 60 years. She was in 2 Bond films, and she is at the heart of this. But the supporting cast do a wonderful job as well. Basically, she ends up between 2 gangs that are both trying to get hold of a bag of money that she gets her hands on. And so half of the film is this caper with her and the bodyguard that she hires called Big Pong, trying to navigate their way through it. It's violent, it's hilarious, and really sad. And it's got a heart that I felt very reinforced by. It's the first film by the director. She comes from a comedy background, and you can tell it's got an improv feel to it. A lot of the scenes are improvised, and it's very dynamic, and you get taken along for the whole journey. Most of it is shot in the Chinatown environment, and that environment within New York is really a character as well. And I loved that, and I loved that about Henri Pic as well. We can't go anywhere right now. Not allowed to go anywhere. Completely understandable. But you can feel a bit boxed in. And so I found with both of those films that it felt like I was in another space, in another world. So if you can go to international films, I highly recommend it, because it's like going on a tiny holiday.
Perfect timing. And you're back next week. Do you know off the top of your head what you're going to be seeing? Are you travelling around the world again?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the new film Baby Done, which we're going to be addressing later on today, hopefully, in the laugh track.
On the laugh track, yeah.
And The Climb. I spoke to the directors of The Climb just before, and it's an American buddy comedy based on toxic male friendship. So look forward to that. So,
sounds right up your alley.
It's absolutely
Robert,
brilliant.
We'll talk of your flatmates. I think it'll be very interesting. Thank you so much.
How dare you call our relationship toxic? I will not have that.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's Robert Kelly in on At the Movies. Back next week for Simon Morris, who is taking a break, a cup of tea and a lie down before the next Matinee Idol on Labour Weekend. If you'd like to get in touch, you can text us 2101 or email standingramoni@rnz.co.nz. Now, just to remind you that during the news at 2 o'clock, Jacinda Ardern is due to address the media, and we will be taking that during our bulletin and following up on that in the next hour too. And if we can, see what we can fit in the next hour. We hope to have the laugh track, the creators, as Rob was saying, of Baby Done. And author Jude Thomas takes us back to the first Lebanese settlers who had a rough ride. This is in her book called Threads of Gold. And in that honour, we're playing Gold Tracks, chosen by Robert. So here is We Are Golden by Mika.
Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a cloud on purpose. Who gives a damn about the family you come from? No giving up when you're young and you want some. Running around running for money. Running around to get money. Running for money. what you think we are. We are golden. We are gold. We are not what you think we are. We are golden. We are
RNZ News at 2 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Sarah Bradley. Jacinda Ardern has been meeting with senior Labour MPs as they take stock of the party's landslide election victory and will be holding a media conference shortly. We'll be crossing to her when that gets underway. In other news, the Director-General of Health has announced a new case of community transmission of COVID-19. Dr Ashley Bloomfield says the case is a man who has worked on ships at the ports of Auckland and Taranaki, and it's been caught early. He says all of the man's close contacts have been tested and are isolating. Dr Bloomfield says the man is thought to have picked up the virus on a ship in New Plymouth, which is due soon to arrive in Napier, where extra restrictions are in place. He says the case is another reminder that the coronavirus is not going away, but it is considered low risk.
There's a very clear explanation because of the nature of his work as to where he might have been infected. And once he was infectious, once he had symptoms, on Friday morning, he got tested and self-isolated. And the 2 days prior to when he might have been infectious, he was not actually out and about.
Dr Ashley Bloomfield. And epidemiologist Michael Baker says catching the case early is an example of the testing system working well. He says over the past 4 months, the country appears to have had 4 breaches of border security. Dr Baker says this is the reality now for the country, with the intensity of the pandemic increasing around the world.
We obviously have trade that we have to keep going by sea and air, and we have people coming back into New Zealand or going backwards and forwards. And these all are really important things to maintain. But along with that, we've obviously got the risk of what we're seeing here of re-importing the virus.
Michael Baker says there is still not a clear idea of the level of risk from this event. Melbourne's 5-kilometre travel rule will be extended to 25 kilometres from midnight under an easing of Victoria's coronavirus restrictions. Melbourne has effectively been under lockdown for more than 100 days. Other changes just announced by the Premier, Daniel Andrews, include the scrapping of the 2-hour time limit for exercise and socialising and the reopening of tennis courts, golf courses and skate parks. And in 2 weeks, people in Melbourne will be allowed to leave their homes for any reason, and restrictions on industries like retail and hospitality will be eased. And that's the news.
It's time to get out and vote. And with so many choices, we at RNZ Concert know that you need all the facts. Fact: Vaughan Williams was arrested for spying on the British fleet. Fact: Rachmaninoff relied on hypnotherapy for writer's block. Fact: Berlioz composed his best work under the influence of opium. Are these the composers you want winning Settling the Score, New Zealand's favourite classical music poll? Have your say. Visit rnz.co.nz/settling the score.
Now time for the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Gisborne mainly fine. Isolated showers about the Gisborne Ranges today and the chance of a shower in Auckland tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taranaki and Horowhenua to Wellington. Cloud increasing and occasional rain developing tonight. Northwest gales in Wellington tomorrow. Whanganui, Manawatu, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Cloud increasing this evening with scattered rain tomorrow. Gale northwesterlies in Wairarapa tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, occasional rain, clearing in Marlborough tomorrow and easing to a few showers elsewhere. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine, cloud and light showers in southern Otago today, and scattered showers spreading north to Christchurch tomorrow. Westland, Fiordland and Southland, cloudy periods with isolated showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands, rain tomorrow night, otherwise fine. RNZ National on air, online, on digital TV and iHeartRadio. It is 4.5 minutes past 2. We'll have more news and weather for you at 3 o'clock.
This is Standing Room Only with Lynn Freeman. Now, we're just awaiting Jacinda Ardern's live media conference, so we will bring it to you as soon as it begins, just running a little bit late. Later this hour, we'll also bring you the laugh track and talk to Jude Thomas about her novel Threads of Gold. It's given us our music theme, so until the media conference with Jacinda Ardern begins, here's Dire Straits, Love Over Gold.
Steps are forbidden, but with knowledge of your sin, you throw your love to all the strangers and caution to the wind. At the place where you came in, you've thrown your love to all the strangers and caution to the wind.
All right, thank you everyone. Look, before we kick off, I'll just share a couple of introductory thoughts and remarks. I said yesterday that today the work would begin, and it has. Already this morning, obviously meeting with senior members of my team and having spoken to a few others as we work through a timetable for the formation of government. My expectation is that we will form government within the next 2 to 3 weeks. There is precedent for governments to be formed before final counts are taken when it's clear that a mandate exists. And it is clear in this case that a mandate exists for that. So whilst it will be another 3 weeks before we have that final result, my expectation is that we will work on government formation within that time frame. I've also had the opportunity to speak this morning with the Governor-General to confirm that we have the ability to form a government as well. I've had a very brief conversation with James Shaw, acknowledging the Green Party's success overnight as well, and placed in a call with Marama Davidson also. We have left it that we will speak again next week, so nothing further to report there other than that initial conversation. And obviously, as you'd expect, I've been in contact with the Labour Party President as well to discuss next steps. We'll be meeting the Labour caucus tomorrow and Tuesday, so cracking on very quickly with the work that we need to do as a new team as we continue to roll out our plan for our COVID recovery and response. Oh, look, we clearly have a mandate on behalf of New Zealand to crack on with government formation. I have said that I want to talk with the Greens, and we'll do that next week. But as I say, that mandate does exist for Labour. No, I have not said that. And everyone will have seen that I have been a consensus builder, but I also need to work with the mandate that Labour has been given as well. And I have said to the Greens that I will talk to them next week. Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say that there is a range over a period of MMP governments. There have been a range of agreements. There have been confidence and supply agreements. There have been consultation agreements. I don't want to draw any conclusion at this point. What is clear is that we do have that mandate to press ahead and form government, but at the same time I have worked to build consensus over the past. But look, I do want to take the time next week to work a few things through.
Do you have enough talent within your caucus to
Yes.
stack a full executive?
Yes, we do. In fact, constantly the issue for me is making sure that we are using the experience we have, bringing through some of that new talent. I mean, just looking overnight, we have a range of people from the medical professional, a midwife, GP, infectious disease specialist, and that's just within health, all coming in the new intake. And look, if we do that, it will be because the talent and expertise is there. And I haven't ruled out the possibility of that. For me, it will be about sitting down and making sure that we draw on both experience, but also the new talent that exists within our existing class of 17 as well.
17 intake. People like Kiritapu Allen, Kieran McAnulty, will they be in your cabinet?
Look, again, I'm not going to award ministerial roles here and now, but it is fair to say that we do have a very talented team of people coming into this term of government.
Have you had any discussions with the Māori Party into a portfolio like health in her first term?
So, look, obviously a portfolio like health is a very significant one, but generally when I've been asked, I have pointed out that we have had governments form before where people have taken on roles very quickly. For me, it will be about balancing that experience and expertise we have, but also the talent that exists in our caucus.
Was last night's vote a vote for a progressive New Zealand?
Well, I think last night's vote was a vote of confidence in the plan that we have around our COVID response and recovery, and to keep going. So that for me was a very clear mandate, because that is as well what was shared with me through the course of the campaign.
A shared vote for you and the Greens, though. Is New Zealand a progressive country now?
I'd like to think that New Zealand has always been a relatively progressive country. And even at times where you may have had a centre-right government, you still see some of those conscience issues coming through. But that's my take on New Zealand.
Contact with the Māori Party and the seat might change
Yeah.
potentially in specials, but if they do, would that be a party that you would look to form a relationship with, even
Look,
if they're not needed?
Yeah, look, I haven't had any conversations there. You're right. There's obviously things there to be finalised and concluded. The thing that's really top of mind for me is that we do hotly contest those Māori seats with the Māori Party. So that does.
Maybe if you form a relationship that could compromise your Labour MPs.
I think for voters it does add some complication there. But look, as I say, we've got a very strong mandate as it is. You'll know that also, whilst I will continue to seek to be a consensus builder, I also want straightforward arrangements for this next term of office.
Do you anticipate seeing?
I'll pan.
Do you anticipate seeing any non-Labour MPs as ministers in this term of government?
Again, that feels to me like a very premature conversation. As I've indicated, very early conversations with other parties, but still a very clear mandate for Labour.
You must have been the only person in the country who wasn't in shock.
I did. Oh, look, on terms of the numbers, I mean, the outcome, the fact that we had that strong mandate, that's what we'd worked so hard for. In terms of the numbers, I think I did indicate on the night that it did exceed my expectations, so that is very fair to say.
In practical terms, what does that strong mandate mean? What legislation, what big moves are you going to want to introduce?
I think we do need to look at, what was the message that New Zealanders, particularly those New Zealanders who may have voted for Labour, who haven't done so before, what they were both endorsing and asking for. I think they were endorsing the work we've done on COVID already, and I do think they were endorsing the plan we have to go forward. There are some areas that we do want to crack on with. We want to make sure that we're working on things like that flexi wage, small business loan schemes, those things that really aid our economic recovery quickly. We will need to expedite.
Are there going to be any non-COVID priorities, or what are the things in the next month that you really want to get into?
Yeah, and look, there are a list of COVID priorities that I do want to make sure that we fulfil before the end of the year, and it is likely that we'll have a short space of house time in order to progress that. But there will be other areas where I do want to strongly signal the extra work that we want to continue on as a government. None of it will be new though, because we laid the foundations for these next 3 years in the previous 3 years.
What about timetables for things
I'll come to you in a minute, Bernard.
The Matariki public holiday, things
Yeah.
that you have announced that aren't actually in train now, how quickly will you move?
Yeah, well, of course, on each of those, we have already indicated the starting time frame for them. So we've said, of course, with tax legislation, that as a matter of course is already predetermined. For Matariki, we've said 2022. So in that sense, that's really set out for us. Bernard.
You said last night you wanted to accelerate the recovery. Does that mean particular projects or policies that would come faster, or maybe more spending?
Yeah, well, look, in terms of some of those projects we've already rolled out, I do believe that there's things that we can make sure we're doing around, for instance, infrastructure delivery to make sure we're really driving some of those projects through. Equally, it is fair to say that there have been policy decisions in the past where actually we've had a very clear view on where we wanted to go. Some of our government arrangements have sometimes slowed down those policy decisions. So just that clear mandate helps us move those through.
What particular things do you think you could accelerate?
Oh, well, for instance, previously there have been very different opinions within government on things like the business loan scheme. That will be an example of where we can just crack on now with getting that rolled out for our small businesses.
On the COVID recovery.
That I think he's left a huge legacy. And I absolutely believe that. And regardless of whether or not New Zealanders have voted for him in the past or their view on him, I think most of us would agree he has given his life in service to politics in New Zealand. And I think that for me commands my respect.
On today's COVID.
Do you see New Zealand first surviving without him?
That's not really a question I've given too much thought to. Really, my thought has been to the people I've worked with, because you can't work with a party for 3 years and not get to know people, and I've worked with some very good people in there.
Will you run in 2023?
I've just run in 2020. Haven't yet taken a weekend. I'm enjoying this moment, and look, we all run in order to maintain momentum and support for our parties, and we carry that for as long as we can. So of course that is my job coming into the next 3 years as well.
Any of those listings down the end of the list that perhaps you hadn't anticipated bringing in?
No, actually we anticipated, of course. What's interesting is we anticipated perhaps having that number of list MPs. What's interesting, of course, is we've had a number of seats turn. So in some cases, some people we might have expected to come in on the list won't, because of those seats that have come in.
Prime Minister, you must have had a lot of people around the world getting in touch with you. Are there any that stick out in your mind?
Oh, I have had a few lovely messages. Scott Morrison was very quick off the bat last night, but also reminded me of our wager today on the rugby. I've had the Prime Minister of Denmark, Pedro Sanchez from Spain. Of course, Boris Johnson reached out as well. Justin Trudeau. I don't tend to have those direct communications with the President of the United States.
There
nor
is
would
a
I
lot of
expect
people in
that.
the US though that are seeing this election coming up and looking to you as an example. Is there anything that you would say to them?
Oh, no, other people's democracies are for them, but my hope as someone who has, of course, a strong interest in politics is that we have elections globally where we try and move beyond the divisive nature that elections can sometimes bring, because that can be damaging for democracy, regardless of the side of the house that you sit on.
On today's COVID case, will there be any sort of response from central government on that? Are there any settings that you need to change?
At this stage, from the case that we've announced today, there's nothing to suggest the need to move any of the restriction levels. That's of course because this is an individual that was already considered to be working in a high-risk area, hence the fact that they're being tested multiple times routinely. And also, whilst we haven't identified which ship and international crew precisely they've been in contact with, we have, of course, a strong probability around its source. Yes, absolutely. In fact, this individual, as I understand, was already tested as part of routine testing 4 times. And so he was within between cycles of his testing regime, and was due to be tested again on Friday. So actually, it is an example of the system working.
And when did you and the government find out, and could you have informed the public sooner?
No, I'm absolutely confident that we've done everything as we would usually do here. I'm told by the Minister of Health that he was informed at 11 minutes past 6 p.m. last night by the Director General of Health. Our usual practice in a case like this would be that it would be part of 1 p.m. reporting, as is per usual.
Did Dr. Bloomfield make any recommendations?
Yeah.
On the candidates referendum, given your reason for not disclosing your vote beforehand is that you didn't want to influence voters, and there are no voters left to influence, what's the reason?
You're right,
what's
there
the
are
reason
no
for
voters.
not sharing?
Oh, because it just
other than political self-interest.
that would be if I was not going to share it at all, which I will. But my view is, because it feels like it'll be tidy to do it at the time that we announce the decision and the outcome.
It cannot change the...
No, not at all, because I may be on the losing side.
So you
I will be. The question is, will I be honest about what I voted? Of course I will be.
You can't influence the vote, so just tell us now.
Legislation. So you've got this obviously a Labour majority of the Greens. What is your, do you still commit to enacting that draft legislation if there is a...
What draft legislation was that, sorry? Absolutely. And that was something I was very, very clear on. I wanted New Zealanders to have confidence that regardless of personal views, we would implement the outcome that New Zealand asked for, and we absolutely will. And I'm obviously confident because both the Labour Party and the Green Party have committed to implementing whatever the outcome of the referendum is.
Just back on Winston Peters, would you be open to offering him a diplomatic posting?
I've given no such consideration to anything like that at this stage. And nor is he the kind of person that would do that either. But again, we're only a matter of hours from him having had that outcome. I think now would be the time for us to at least pay homage to the role that he's played in New Zealand politics.
How about a valedictory?
I think there's a number of ambassadors for the North.
How about a valedictory for Winston?
I hope there will be some way that can be delivered. I think that was a loss for a previous party leader. I understand, of course, Peter Dunn had that similar experience, and I think that we lose something when we don't have that opportunity. While strictly speaking, there won't be a way to do that in a parliamentary environment. I'd like to find a way that can be done in another form.
Can I ask how Foreign Affairs is operating at the moment?
Sorry, was
Foreign Affairs operates at the moment? Is he interim? Were you appointed interim
So there's
Foreign
a
Affairs?
period that even if someone isn't elected as a member of Parliament, that they operate for a period as a minister. And so, that's the arrangement that we've always had. But you run a special form of arrangement in this period anyway.
Given he's on the roll of Right Honourable, would you expect that you would offer him a knighthood?
This is none of those decisions are ever publicly disclosed until the date that things are announced, and nor would I discuss any of those things publicly either. I haven't, but I have sent him a quick message, and I do intend to speak to him sometime soon. I wouldn't expect him to if it was in a relatively short time frame this morning.
Overwhelming mandate. Would you reconsider measures to address the quality of capital gains tax?
Well, that implies that we haven't been taking on measures to address inequality already. We have, and we will continue to. No, I was very clear on my position on that, and I'm sticking to my word. Last question, Derek. Well, those weren't my words, but sorry, continue. Well, you asked me yesterday if we would be implementing our manifesto, and my response was absolutely. Obviously we have a mandate to implement that manifesto. There will always be issues that will come up over the course of a term in office where voters will expect us to respond, both with policy and direction and sometimes legislation, and we will do that as well. Okay. I've always said that I was hopeful that we would find a conclusion and a result that satisfies all of those issues around treaty issues and ownership, and of course on Fletcher's. And look, and my hope remains the same, that we will do that. But again, I haven't managed to in the last 12 hours.
Did you get to sleep in this morning?
No, I was up. I was up dealing with COVID. All right, thank you everyone.
All right. Did you give any consideration to making...
Congratulations.
I'll get the question and then I'll look that way. Yep. Did you give any consideration to making the positive test public yesterday when voting was open?
I did get briefed on the outcome at about just after 6 o'clock last night. I considered whether or not to make that public last night. I don't think it would have been appropriate to have made that public before 7 p.m. when the polls closed, and in fact there was some... I didn't even have time to consider whether or not that would be consistent with the prohibition on what we can do on election day. I didn't have time to get advice on that because the time frame was so tight. And then obviously everything else got subsumed with the election results. But of course it is usual when we get a positive COVID-19 result for that to be announced at 1 o'clock the next day, once we have assembled some further background information on that case, once the first critical parts of contact tracing have been done. Well, the government's always on standby when it comes to COVID-19. The alert levels indicate the level of standby preparedness that we have at any given time. At the moment, nothing about this case suggests that we should be thinking about any imminent move in the alert levels. It does appear to be reasonably well contained. It does appear the person had a relatively limited number of contacts. They have done all of the right things. They got the test exactly when they should get the test, which was very early. They've been isolated. Their contacts have been and are being isolated. So nothing would suggest that this is something that that would prompt us to review the alert levels at this point. No, I think our messages have been the same all the way along. We still want people to be doing the precautionary measures, so good hand hygiene, coughing into your elbow, staying home if you're not feeling well, but also making sure you're keeping good contact tracing records. So the question I encourage everybody to ask themselves all the time is, if someone rang me up and said, you've been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, could you identify everyone that you'd been in contact with in the last 2 weeks? And if the answer to that question is no, then please start using the app, start keeping a better record, because that will really speed things up if we need to, trace your contacts.
The beggars low match is just a couple of hours away. What assurances can you give the thousands of people that are attending that, given this is an Auckland case?
Look, like I said, the evidence that we've had so far is that this is someone who has had a relatively low profile. They haven't been in contact with a large number of people. Their contacts have been identified already. Their immediate contacts, their workmates and their housemates, have already been isolated, and there's work going on just to make sure that that's completely contained. So at this point, there's no cause for alarm. This is the system working as we want it to, but of course we always keep a very, very close watch on these things, and if any of that changes, if any new evidence comes to light that suggests we need to do something different, then we would.
Are you confident the Ministry of Health didn't withhold the information that they would normally tell you, that there might be a suspicion of community transmission?
No, my understanding is that the person first sought testing yesterday, not yesterday, sorry, on Friday, it's all a blur. But the first sought testing on Friday, the results were processed within the usual timeframes that they would be processed. The Director General contacted me very shortly after he was told, which is again what he does. He did collect a bit of the basic information before he contacted me, which again helps. And so I think that all the timeframes that we would normally work to seem to have been followed here.
What's the latest intel you've had about
Do you want to stay on as education?
Haven't even had time to think about that in the last 24 hours.
What's the latest intel you've got on
this is a person who works on ships that have come into New Zealand from abroad, so almost certainly the working theory is that it's come off one of those ships, and so that's the contact tracing process that's going on at the moment.
Having done both jobs for the last couple of months, is it something that you think you could sustain and carry on, especially now that you've done?
Look, I haven't even turned my mind to that. My focus over the last couple of months has obviously been on campaigning and maintaining both portfolios during that period of time. I haven't sat down and thought about it. I haven't had a chance to talk to the Prime Minister about it, and ultimately it's her decision, not mine. So.
Are you planning to open New Zealand up while keeping it safe from COVID, given that
Look, I think you've already seen evidence of the steps that we can take there. We've been opening up the border to new targeted work groups, to a smaller group of international students. You'll see further movement in those kind of areas. And then, of course, as it's safe to do so, and as we can work through all of the logistical arrangements, we would look to have safe travel zones with other countries where there's no community transmission of COVID-19. But, of course, we need time to work through those properly. We've got to work through the diplomatic channels, and, of course, we've got logistical channels to work, the issues to work through there, like separating the airport so that you're keeping safe zone travellers separate from hot zone travellers. So all of those things have got to be worked through very carefully. We would not rush into that decision. No, this has shown the system working. So one of the things that gave me reassurance last night was that this is someone who has been working in a higher risk area of the port. They have been regularly tested, so I think they've had four fortnightly tests already, and they were actually due another fortnightly test, I think, around about now. So this was the system working exactly as we would expect it.
Obviously pointed out,
Yeah.
they said that the ports in particular were a
Yeah.
weakness area. So
Well,
if they say to you, you've failed, what would you say?
I'd utterly reject that. This person had been tested regularly. They were due another test. So even if they'd not proactively sought a test because they were feeling unwell, they would have been tested again and we would have picked this up anyway. So this is exactly what the surveillance testing that we do at the ports and at the airport is designed to pick up. Those are the things that the contact tracing will work through at the moment. They'll look at every ship that he has been on over the last fortnight or so, where those ships have gone, testing for the crew. So if they're still in New Zealand waters, we'd look to test the crews on those ships, and then obviously we'd look at whether there were other things that we needed to look at, including the environmental factors like surface testing. Well, so he worked on a ship in New Plymouth last week. Given the time of infection, it's more likely that he got infected at a ship in Auckland rather than in the ship in New Plymouth. But of course, they're all ships of interest, and so that's the work that's happening at the moment.
Minister, you're a campaigner from way back. What was your favourite electorate you won last night? Labour one.
My own one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Job security is good. Anything else? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.